Oh,
Nestled
look
between
at
green
him!
hills and winding rivers lay a
He
village
thinks
that
he's so
seemed timeless.
great!
The homes were simple
Not
mud
so
walls,
mighty now,
thatched
are we?
roofs, smoke rising
Look
from
at
clay
him! He looks
chimneys. Fields of
ridiculous!
millet
Yes,
and
that's
maize
right. He is
stretched
a
out beyond,
fraud.
worked by calloused hands that knew both
What is he
hardship and
doing
joy.
here?
Life here moved with the rhythm of seasons, guided by ancient traditions passed down through generations. Yet, beneath this calm surface, there was a story, whispered often, though never loudly, the tale of the king's son, known not for his crown but for his scars. They called him the Scarred Prince. Malik. No one in the village had seen his full face in years. Some claimed the fire that burned through the palace when he was a boy had left him so twisted that even mirrors wept. Others said his scars were a punishment from the gods, a mark of shame hidden behind thick veils and shadows. Children listened wide-eyed as their parents warned them never to speak of him too boldly, for the king's ears were everywhere. Yet, in the safety of courtyards and moonlit fields, the villagers laughed about him, turning pain into story, story into jest. And no one laughed louder than Amina. Amina was the kind of girl who filled spaces with light and fire. Her laughter was quick, her words sharper still, with wide, curious eyes and a smile that could command attention. She had become the heart of the village's gatherings. When others whispered carefully about the Scarred Prince, Amina turned their whispers into jokes. Perhaps his scars are so deep, she once said at the well, her bangles clinking as she fetched water, that even the drumbeats hide from him. The women giggled, and the children repeated her words, turning them into a chant. Amina's voice carried far, like a bird unafraid of storms. To her, Malik was not a prince to be feared, but a figure made of rumor and shadow, easy to mock because he was never there to defend himself. Yet, beyond the walls of the palace, Malik heard everything. He did not walk in the markets. He did not join the feasts. Instead, he lived like a ghost, in the chambers of stone and silence. His only companion was an ancient drum, carved from sacred wood, its skin stretched tight and worn from years of use. When his heart ached, he struck it. When his anger burned, he struck it harder. When loneliness wrapped around him like a chain, he let the beats echo through the night. The servants knew the sound well. Some feared it, saying the drumbeat carried storms that rattled their bones. Others swore the rhythm had power to heal, that the beat of his hand could soothe fever or call rain. But for Malik, the drum was neither curse nor miracle. It was the only language that did not betray him. On nights when the moon painted silver patterns across the palace floor, Malik would sit alone, his scarred hands pressing against the drum's surface. He played not for the king, nor for the people who mocked his hidden face, but for himself, for the part of his soul still unbroken. And though he never showed his face, the villagers could not escape the sound. Sometimes, when the wind carried the rhythm down the hills, mothers hushed their children, and men stopped in their fields to listen. The beats were heavy, aching, full of secrets no words could carry. Still, Amina laughed. Whenever the sound reached her ears, she shook her head with boldness. "It is just a prince sulking in his corner," she told her friends. "If his scars frighten him, why should they frighten me?" The others marveled at her courage, or perhaps her foolishness. They repeated her jokes, lifted her name higher. Amina enjoyed the attention, believing her beauty and wit gave her power beyond question. But fate has a way of humbling even the proudest hearts. For while Amina's laughter filled the village, Malik's drumbeats were growing stronger, deeper, more alive. In every strike of his hand, he poured not just anger but longing, not just sorrow but a hidden strength. Each beat was shaping something that even he did not yet understand. And soon, the day would come when her laughter and his drum would collide not in whispers or jokes, but in a moment that would shake the village, silence her tongue, and bind their destinies together. Every year, when the harvest was stored and the air turned cool, the king declared a festival unlike any other, the Festival of Drums. It was a time when villages gathered at the palace grounds, carrying baskets of grain, fruits, and livestock as tribute. Fires burned bright through the night. Dancers spun in circles until dust rose beneath their feet, and the sound of drums echoed from hill to hill. The festival was not only celebration, it was a reminder. It showed the people that the king was strong, that the throne still bound every village together under his rule. This year, however, whispers carried a strange weight. Many wondered, would the Scarred Prince appear? The villagers were both curious and afraid. Children tugged at their mothers' clothes, asking if the prince's scars could truly turn milk sour. Old men shook their heads, warning that to see him was to carry his curse in your dreams. But to the king, appearance was not a choice, it was duty. And so, For the first time in years, Malik was commanded to stand among the people. When the day arrived, the palace gates opened wide. Villagers poured in, their voices rising with excitement and fear. Amina walked proudly among them, her hair woven with beads, her bracelets flashing in the sun. She was dressed in her finest bright cloth of gold and red, her chin lifted high as though she were royalty herself. As they gathered in the grand courtyard, rows of drummers struck their instruments, filling the air with thunder. Dancers leaped and twisted, their bodies telling old stories of gods and ancestors. The king sat upon his high seat, his crown glinting in the firelight, and there, a step behind him, stood Malik. The prince's face was hidden beneath a dark mask, carved from wood, painted with sharp lines. Only his eyes were visible, deep, shadowed, unreadable. The villagers gasped. Some looked away, others leaned closer to see what little they could. The mask, instead of hiding his scars, made the mystery heavier, feeding the hunger of their whispers. And then came Amina's voice, loud, clear, unafraid. She called out to those around her, "Tell me, do princes wear masks now? Or is he hiding his dinner beneath it?" Laughter burst like firecrackers. The crowd leaned into her words, eager for more. Amina grinned, basking in their attention, her eyes fixed boldly on Malik. She wanted him to hear. She wanted him to feel. Another quip followed, sharper, mocking not just his scars but the very idea of him as a prince. Each word sliced through the air like a blade, and each laugh from the villagers drove it deeper. Malik stood motionless. His hands gripped the drum he carried, fingers pressing so hard against its skin that his knuckles turned white. Inside, his heart beat with the weight of shame and fury, but his face betrayed nothing. He did not answer her. He did not look away. He stood in silence, the mask hiding what he would not allow them to see. The festival roared on for Malik. The music was drowned beneath the echo of her laughter. For Amina, it was triumph. She felt untouchable, lifted higher by every cheer. Yet, as the night deepened, the elders of the palace exchanged knowing looks. They leaned on their staffs and whispered among themselves. They spoke of the old belief that the drumbeat was not simply music but a mirror of the soul, that within Malik's hands rested a power greater than his scars, a power that could stir the heart and bend pride to its knees. And though Amina did not hear them, fate was already moving. The fire crackled high, the drums pounded louder, but a silence waited at the edge of the night, a silence heavy with promise. Soon, the scarred prince's drum would speak, and no mocking word would stand against it. The morning after the festival of drums, the village was buzzing. From the well to the fields, from the market stalls to the narrow streets, Amina's name was on every tongue. Did you hear her words? One woman laughed as she pounded grain. The prince stood like a stone, while she cut him down with nothing but her tongue. Another replied. Even children mimicked her, holding their hands to their faces and pretending to wear masks. Stumbling about to the sound of giggles, Amina soaked it in like sunlight. Wherever she went, people leaned toward her, waiting for her next sharp remark. Her beauty had already made her the star of the village, but now, her boldness gave her a crown of its own. She walked with her head higher, her steps slower, as though the earth itself should bow to her confidence. In the evenings, when families gathered, Amina's friends begged her to repeat her words. She reenacted the moment, lifting an imaginary mask with exaggerated gestures, her voice dripping with mockery. Laughter erupted again and again, and each time, Amina's pride swelled larger. She told herself she was untouchable. What was a scarred prince compared to her wit? What could he do hide further in his palace, buried beneath shadows and drums? To Amina, Malik was nothing more than the subject of her jokes, a figure she could shape with her words. But in the palace, Malik's silence grew heavier. He had endured many things, servants whispering behind his back, his father's cold gaze, his own reflection turning him into a stranger. But Amina's words were different. They carried not only cruelty but laughter, and that laughter spread like fire. At night, he sat alone with his drum. The hall was dark except for the faint glow of moonlight spilling across the floor. His fingers trembled over the drumskin, and then he struck. The sound echoed deep, rolling through the empty corridors like a storm building in the distance. Each beat was sharper than the last, each rhythm filled with words he could not speak. He thought of Amina's laughter, of her proud face shining in the torchlight, and the beats grew louder, faster. The servants passing nearby paused, their eyes wide. Some whispered that the prince's anger could summon thunder. Others crossed themselves and hurried away. Malik did not care. The drum was his tongue, his cry, his defiance. He poured himself into it until sweat clung to his scarred skin and his hands ached from the force. Yet, when the final echo faded, only silence answered him. Meanwhile, the village celebrated Amina, as though she were a heroine. Young men tried to win her attention, charmed by her courage. Women admired her beauty, even as they envied it. And Amina believed every glance, every word of praise. Taught her mother warned her quietly one evening, "Daughter, pride is a fire. Too much, and it will burn you." But Amina only laughed, brushing off the warning. "What is there to fear from a man who hides his face? He can do nothing to me. Even his drum cannot speak as loudly as my words." Yet, beneath the laughter and admiration, a shadow was growing. The more Amina mocked, the more Malik withdrew into his secret world. His silence was not weakness, it was a gathering storm. And while Amina lifted her chin higher, basking in her imagined victory, destiny was preparing a lesson that would bend even the proudest spirit. The palace was not a home to Mullik, it was a cage. Its marble floors and towering pillars were meant to inspire awe, but to him, they only echoed his loneliness. Where others saw beauty, he saw walls that pressed in, shutting him away from the world outside. He remembered the night that changed everything. He had been a boy of 7, chasing his mother's laughter through the palace halls, when fire swallowed the air. Flames roared from room to room, hungry and merciless. His mother's arms had shielded him, but not completely. The fire kissed his skin with cruelty, leaving its mark across his face, his neck, his arms. His mother never rose again, and the boy who stumbled out of the smoke was no longer the same. The king, though he kept his son, looked upon him with disappointment. Malik could see it in the way his father's eyes lingered on the scars, in the silence that fell whenever others asked about the prince. Malik grew up not with affection but with pity and avoidance. Servants bowed, but their eyes slid quickly away. Courtiers offered respect, but in whispers, they spoke of curses and shame. It was in that silence that Malik found the drum. It had belonged to his mother. She had played it in the evenings, her rhythms soft and full of warmth. After her death, the instrument was left untouched in a corner of her chamber. Malik claimed it as his own. At first, his small hands fumbled against the stretched skin, but soon he learned the language of rhythm. The drum did not turn away. It did not recoil. It did not pity him. Instead, it carried his pain, beating it out into the world. When anger burned in him, the beats were sharp and furious. When sorrow weighed him down, the rhythm slowed, heavy and deep like a grieving heart. Some nights, his playing filled the palace until even the guards at the gates felt their chests tremble with its echo. The servants began to whisper that his drum was no ordinary instrument. "It carries storms," some said, crossing themselves when they heard it. "It heals," others argued, recalling fevers that seemed to break after listening to his midnight rhythms. No matter what they believed, one truth remained: the drum spoke what Malik could not. But even the drum could not shield him from words. The rumors reached him like poison carried on the wind. He heard of villagers mocking him, spinning stories of his scars. And more than once, Amina's name was mentioned, the girl whose laughter rang loudest. She had made him into a character for their amusement, her sharp tongue cutting deeper than any blade. At first, Malik tried to ignore it. He told himself that he did not care what peasants thought. But in the quiet of the night, her laughter returned to him, echoing louder than the beat of his drum. It mocked not just his scars but the very core of his existence. One evening, Malik struck the drum with such force that the skin nearly split. His body shook with rage, but when the sound died away, he sat motionless. Slowly, silence hardened into something else: determination. If words were her weapon, then rhythm would be his. If laughter was her shield, then the drum would be his truth. He did not need to shout or argue. He only needed to play. In the shadows of the palace, Malik's scarred hands hovered over the drum as though preparing for battle. The rhythm he would unleash was not merely music. It would be the voice of years of pain, longing, and buried power. And though Amina laughed still in her village, the storm was already forming in the prince's heart. Soon, the sound of his drum would reach her ears not as a distant rhythm carried by the wind, but as a force strong enough to break her pride and bend her spirit. The sacred night of the full moon arrived, when the festival of drums reached its height. By tradition, this was the night when rhythms were offered not for dance or feasting, but for prayer. The drums were said to carry the voices of the people to the heavens, binding them to the spirits of their ancestors. Villagers and nobles alike filled the palace courtyard, their faces lit by the glow of hundreds of torches. The king sat on his raised seat, silent and stern, while the elders leaned upon their staffs, their eyes full of knowing weight. At the edge of the gathering, Malik stood once more, his mask upon his face, his drum cradled in his arms. He had not wished to play. His scars, his silence, these were enough burdens without the weight of their stares. But the king commanded it, and Malik obeyed. The murmurs spread quickly. Will he play? The scarred one. What sound can he make but sorrow? Among them, Amina stood with her friends, her smile sharp as ever. She folded her arms, her bracelets clinking. Let him strike, she whispered. Perhaps the ancestors will pity his face if they cannot stomach his sound. Her companions snickered, but their laughter was softer this time, uneasy under the weight of the night. The drummers who came before Malik played their pieces steady, skilled, but ordinary. The crowd clapped, the dancers swayed, but no spirit stirred. Then the elders raised their hands. Silence fell. All eyes turned to the prince. Malik stepped forward. For a moment, he stood motionless, the torchlight glinting off his mask. His scarred fingers rested on the drum, trembling slightly. His heart thundered, not with fear but with the weight of years, of his father's cold eyes, of the villagers' whispers, of Amina's mocking voice. He closed his eyes, then he struck. The first beat rolled through the courtyard like distant thunder. It was not hurried, not loud, but deep, heavy, alive. The crowd shifted uneasily. Another beat followed, then another, building like footsteps of something vast approaching. The air seemed to thicken, each sound carrying not just rhythm but meaning. Malik's hands moved faster, the beats weaving into patterns, speaking of fire and loss, of a boy scarred and a mother gone. The villagers felt the pain in their chests, sharp and real, though no words were spoken. Some pressed hands against their hearts, startled by the force of it. The rhythm grew louder, brighter, alive with defiance. It was no longer sorrow alone, it was longing, strength, and an aching hunger to be seen. The courtyard shook with the sound, torches flickering wildly as though the flames themselves were swayed by the beat. A woman in the crowd gasped. Tears spilled down her cheeks, though she did not know why. A child clung to his mother's hand, whispering that the drum was speaking to him. Even the king leaned forward, his stern face betraying the smallest flicker of awe. And Amenemina tried to laugh. She opened her mouth, ready to mock as always, but no sound came. The rhythm gripped her, pulling her chest tight, beating inside her, as though her heart had been caught in Malik's hands. She pressed her lips together, her brows furrowing. Her pride shouted at her to resist, but the drum kept breaking through, each strike stripping away her shield. The sound changed again, softer now, aching with unspoken love, the kind that hides beneath scars and silence. It was a song of a soul yearning to be understood, to be forgiven, to be free. Amina's knees trembled. She told herself she was only tired from standing, that it was nothing. But the rhythm grew stronger, each beat bending her pride lower, pressing her spirit into surrender. Her breath came uneven. Her friends whispered her name, but she could not answer. Then, without willing it, without thinking, her body bowed, her knees hit the earth. A gasp tore through the crowd. The proud village girl, the sharp-tongued beauty who had mocked the prince so boldly, was kneeling in the dirt, her head bowed before the power of his drum. Malik did not stop. His hands moved faster, louder, fiercer, until it seemed the very heavens listened. But inside, his chest ached not with victory, but with release. For the first time, he was not the scarred prince, not the hidden ghost of the palace. He was a man, seen, heard, undeniable. When at last the final beat struck, silence fell. Heavy, stunned silence. The people stared at Malik, at the drum, at Amina still kneeling. Not a word was spoken. And in that silence, destinies shifted. Pride was broken. Power was revealed. And the story of the scarred prince had only just begun. The courtyard still held its silence when the final echoes of Malik's drum faded into the night. Torches crackled, the only sound against the stunned quiet. All eyes remained fixed on the scarred prince and the girl who knelt before him. Amina's cheeks burned as though the flames themselves had leaped to her skin. Her body trembled, not from choice, but from the weight of the rhythm that still pulsed through her chest. She wanted to rise, to toss her hair and laugh as though nothing had happened, but her knees refused her. They pressed against the earth, heavy with shame. The villagers began to murmur, "She kneels." The girl who mocked him brought low by his drum. "Is this not a sign from the ancestors?" The whispers cut sharper than any blade. For years, Amina had ruled the village with beauty and wit, her laughter a crown that no one dared to challenge. But tonight, that crown had slipped. rolling into the dirt before everyone's eyes. Her friends, once quick to laugh beside her, shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, ashamed by the sight. Others leaned together, whispering. The admiration that had followed her everywhere now turned uncertain, questioning, even cruel. Amina's pride screamed within her, "Rise, rise before them all. Do not let him see you broken." But when she tried to lift herself, her legs quivered and buckled. She remained kneeling, her palms digging into the soil. Balmec stood silent. He did not gloat, did not move closer, did not even look at her directly. His mask caught the firelight, hiding his expression, yet his stillness carried a weight heavier than words. For the first time, it was Amina who was unseen, small, humbled beneath the rhythm. She could no longer mock Dot at last. She forced herself upright. Her movements were stiff, her face pale beneath the torchlight. She dared not meet Malik's Gazor, the eyes of the villagers. Her bracelets clinked as her hands shook, betraying the storm raging inside her. The king dismissed the gathering soon after, but the whispers did not fade. As the villagers returned to their homes, Amina heard fragments of their voices trailing behind her. She mocked him, and now she kneels. Perhaps her pride has met its match. Maybe the scarred one carries more power than we knew. Each word was a thorn pressed into her pride. That night, Amina could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the thatched ceiling of her family's hut, the sound of the drums still echoing in her bones. No matter how she turned, no matter how tightly she shut her eyes, the rhythm returned. Heavy and unrelenting, her mother's quiet voice broke the silence. "You mocked him, child, and now you have seen what lies behind his scars." Amina snapped, her voice sharp though it wavered. "It was only a drum, only sound. I knelt because her words faltered. Because what? Because her body betrayed her. Because her spirit bent to a rhythm that spoke of pain she could not laugh at." Her mother said nothing more, only sighed softly, as though she had seen this truth long before her daughter would admit it. Amina turned away, pulling the blanket over her head, but the shame clung to her like smoke. For the first time in her life, laughter did not come to her lips. For the first time, her pride felt like chains rather than a crown. And somewhere in the palace, Malik sat alone with his drum, his hands resting quietly on its skin. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew that the girl who once mocked him now carried his rhythm in her heart, whether she wanted it or not. The palace slept beneath the cold hush of dawn, yet Malik sat awake, his fingers pressed against the worn surface of his drum. He had not played since the festival. The air around him was heavy, as though even the walls carried the memory of that night. The silence of the crowd, the girl brought to her knees, the rhythm that had left his own heart raw. But Malik's silence was not born only of triumph. It was born of memory that clung to him like smoke from a fire long extinguished. He could still see it. The night flames swallowed his mother's chamber. He had been a child of 7, clutching a wooden toy drum when the fire roared through the palace. Screams filled the air. Servants rushed with buckets. But it was too late. He remembered his mother's arms pushing him through a doorway, shielding him even as fire kissed her skin. He had stumbled into the courtyard, his face burning, the toy drum falling from his hands. The scars itched even now, a reminder etched into his skin of that moment when he was saved, yet also left behind. His mother never rose from the ashes. His father, the king, had looked upon him with a gaze that mixed pity with disappointment. The son who should have been a warrior prince was instead broken, his face marred, his body marked by flame. In public, the king hid him away. In private, he rarely spoke his name. From then on, Malik lived in the shadows of the palace. He did not join hunts. He did not train with the guards. He was the scarred heir no one wished to claim. Only the drum remained. It began with soft taps, secret beats in the quiet of his chambers. At first, they were clumsy, nothing more than a child's distraction. But over the years, the rhythms grew into something fierce. Each strike of the skin became a voice when his own failed him. Each rhythm was a cry his father never heard, a plea his mother never answered, a song that rose from the ache of being unseen. The servants whispered among themselves. Some feared him, saying his drums could summon storms, that his anger lived inside the beats. Others admired quietly, claiming his rhythms carried healing, that when he played near the sick, fevers broke, and restless infants slept. Malik never confirmed these tales. He let the drum speak for him, for it was the only thing that never turned away in disgust. But Amina's laughter had reached even the palace walls. The servants, careless with their tongues, had told him of the village girl who mocked his scars without shame. Her words had traveled, sharper than arrows, and each time Malik heard of her jokes, the weight in his chest deepened. Yet he did not rage. Instead, he played harder, faster, until sweat dripped from his brow and his palms bled against the hide. He told himself he did not care, that the girl's mockery was nothing new, only another echo of what he had always endured. Still, her voice haunted him more than the others, perhaps because she laughed so freely, as though she had never tasted pain, perhaps because her mockery mirrored the sneers of courtiers, the disappointment in his father's eyes. She carried his shame into the open, where the whole village laughed, and Malik felt once more like a child clutching his drum in the ashes of fire. When the festival came, and he was asked to play, Malik almost refused, but something within him stirred a determination born not of revenge, but of the need to be seen, if not for who he was, then for the truth of what lived in his heart. The drum had never failed him, and he would let it speak where his voice could not. And so, that night, when the rhythm burst from him like a storm, it was not to humiliate Amina. It was to tear open the veil that had hidden him all his life. His pain became sound, his scars became rhythm, and for the first time, the people saw. They did not see a prince hidden by a mask. They saw a soul burning with fire and grief. Now, in the quiet dawn, Malik sat with his drum, his scars catching the pale light. He wondered if Amina still mocked him, in her heart, or if, like him, she now carried the rhythm she could never escape. For many nights after the festival, Amina carried the weight of her shame like a stone strapped to her chest. The laughter she once wore so easily had vanished. Even the children who used to run to her for stories now watched her with wide, cautious eyes. When she passed by, whispers followed, not of admiration but of mockery. She knelt, they said. The proud girl bowed to the scarred prince. Each word pierced deeper than her own jokes had once cut. Amina tried to bury her feelings in routine, fetching water, tending to her family's goats, weaving mats with the village women. But no matter how hard she worked, the rhythm returned. It haunted her at night, that steady beat that had broken her pride. Sometimes, in dreams, she heard it calling her name. She would wake breathless, clutching her chest, ashamed at how deeply it had reached her. Finally, the restlessness became too heavy to ignore. One morning, she rose before dawn and walked toward the palace gates. Her steps were slow, her heart pounding louder than her sandals on the stone path. The guards looked at her with suspicion, but she lowered her eyes and asked to see the prince. Word of her request reached Malik, but when she was brought before him, he did not speak. He sat in silence, his mask in place, his drum resting by his side. The weight of his stillness made her throat tighten. Her voice trembled. I came to the words caught in her chest. Pride fought against humility, a battle raging in her heart. Finally, she forced them out. I came to say I am sorry. Malik did not move. He did not even look at her. The silence stretched, sharp and suffocating. Amina felt her cheeks burn. Part of her wanted to turn and run, to leave before the rejection crushed her. But another part, the path that had been broken by the drumbeat, knew she could not flee, not this time. She lowered her head and whispered, I know words may not be enough. Still, Malik said nothing. His silence spoke louder than any reply. Forgiveness would not come easily. Her laughter had cut deep, and scars of the heart healed slower than those of the skin. From that day, Amina began to change. She no longer sought to be the loudest voice in the crowd. Instead, she served quietly at village gatherings, fetching food for elders, helping children with their tasks, listening instead of mocking. The villagers noticed. Some laughed at her newfound humility, but others nodded with respect. For Amina, the work was not about them. It was about the silence of the prince, the weight of his eyes that had refused to meet hers. She longed for a day when she might stand before him again, not as a mocker, not as a girl broken by pride, but as someone worthy of being heard. The day came quietly, without festival or fanfare. The villagers gathered in the square, called by the beating of a single drum. It was Malik, seated beneath the great tree, his scars bare beneath the sunlight. For the first time, he wore no mask. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some turned away in pity, others stared in awe. But Malik did not flinch. His hands moved steadily across the drum, the rhythm calm and strong, not the storm of grief, nor the fire of anger, but the steady heartbeat of peace. Among the crowd stood Amina, her breath caught at the sight of him, his face unveiled, his scars no longer hidden. Yet what struck her most was not the mark of the fire, but the strength in his gaze, the quiet dignity that had always been there, waiting to be seen. Slowly, she stepped forward. Each movement was deliberate, each step heavy with the weight of her past pride. When she reached him, she did not speak. Words had failed her before. Instead, she sank to her knees, not from the pull of his drum, not from shame or fear, but from a choice born of respect. The villagers held their breath. Malik's hand stilled. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, he looked at her truly, looked his scars framed by the light, and in his eyes, Amina saw no hatred, no vengeance, only a weary strength and a quiet release. She bowed her head. "Forgive me," she whispered, though barely above a breath. Malik's drum answered in place of words, a gentle rhythm rising like dawn. It was no longer a song of pain, but of healing, and Amina listened, her head bowed, her heart transformed.